the heck is going on with the Sunday morning news shows? I'm a big fan. This is like the only time I ever watch Alphabet Soup News because I do enjoy those Sunday morning shows. We used to turn to them for hardcore news analysis. Remember those days? But as the Sunday morning shows have lost ratings, and now that Meet the Press is trailing the other networks, they're getting quite desperate, and it's becoming a little obvious to the viewer. NBC's Meet the Press invited rapper Will.I.Am on the show to talk about Benghazi, education, and world affairs. I'm a big fan of Will.I.Am and his music, but I don't tune into news shows to get Will.I.Am's news analysis on the fallout from the Benghazi attacks. Doesn't even make sense. When the host David Gregory went to Will.I.Am during the Benghazi discussion, this is what happened.
A lot of people do not want America involved overseas.
As a world traveler, I have the same viewpoint. You know, when you go to Germany and Australia and Brazil, especially Brazil, and then India, you see these developing countries, and they're developing in one particular area in education and technology. And then when you come to America, you see this, like, we grow, but the citizens aren't growing.
So now Germany is a developing country. Wow, maybe he should keep his day job. I'm not sure that Will.I.Am has ever done a show in Libya, so maybe he hasn't heard of Benghazi or what actually happened there. Judson Phillips of Tea Party Nation is equally baffled as to why NBC had a rapper on Meet the Press. Judson, welcome to Smart Life. Good to have you.
Hi, Gina. Thanks for inviting me. And I'll say this about that show on NBC. Since David Gregory is now seeing a psychologist, it truly is Meet the Depressed.
You know, it's funny because they hired a psychological consultant to, I guess, help him relate better to his audience because his ratings were down. And I guess the thing that bothers me, you know, you and I have talked about this a lot. We did a tour together, touring the country for candidates. And one of the things that we talked about a lot is how culture does lead the politics, Judson. We all know this. But it seems to have gotten to almost a silly level at this point when we're having rappers who evidently are completely and entirely unfamiliar with the news of the day going in to do news analysis on what used to be a serious news analysis show. Aren't they really reaching to the bottom of the barrel here, Judson? And does it not tell you how completely desperate they are?
Oh, it's you know it's desperate when you're going to need an electron microscope to find David Gregory's ratings for Meet the Depressed. And I'm sorry, if I were Will.I.Am and all the ridicule that is being heaped upon him for his appearance on there, I mean, I think I'd go on a 3-state crime spree and strangle the person that booked me on that show.
Yeah, apparently the whole goal was to get Will.I.Am to actually tweet that he was going to be on the show to his who knows how many millions of Twitter followers. And they even admitted that. And I guess that was part of the advice of this psychological consultant. I think they need a new one, by the way, and I'm volunteering for that because I think that was a really bad move. It was so transparent. Is it not insulting to the audience, Judson, when these shows reach so far down to try and be hip, I guess you'd say? Doesn't it say, hey, audience, we just think you're too stupid to listen to real news analysis by people who are perhaps intellectually stimulating?
Well, you know, it really is offensive to the audience. And I will confess to you, I haven't watched Meet the Depressed or any of those other shows in years. I mean, it's just, I could sleep, I could have a root canal, or I could watch Meet the Depressed. Root canal looks pretty interesting at that point. But here's the thing that none of these networks will do, and this is the real crying shame about all this. NBC's ratings are just in the tank, but everything they do is politically motivated. If anybody there was running the show and their brain cells were not on the endangered species list, they'd launch a conservative news show. Run it behind or in front of Meet the Depressed, see which one does better. That's what most companies do. It's called test marketing. But unfortunately, all these networks, with the possible, and keyword there being possible exception of Fox, are more driven by a political ideology than they are by the desire to make money.
Yeah, and I think the funniest part of this whole thing had to be how the pundits sitting around the table, of course, with the exception of the conservative from Utah, were all kind of sitting around and nodding in agreement with him, like that what he was saying was making any sort of associative sense. It really was more like he was completely unprepared for the show, had absolutely nothing to say on the matters at hand, which were basically foreign relations and Benghazi. And so he just kind of made up his own thing and just started talking. I know that, you know, it is important, you know, each of us who have done commentary on these shows, we go in with an idea about what we want to say, and we try to work our sound bites into the questions asked, especially if it's a hostile environment. But this wasn't a hostile environment. He didn't even, you know, necessarily mention any of his own charities or seem to have a real agenda. It was just more like rambling. And I was waiting for the host of the show to take control, and instead, I don't know if you noticed, what happened was Will.I.Am took control of the show and started asking the others around the table what they thought about institutional racism in the prisons or whatever. The host literally lost control of the show in this situation, and yet there were no apologies for that by the host or anyone else on the show, and literally everyone sat around not wanting to say that the emperor essentially had no clothes.
David, I'd like to do phone a friend right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you know, it is stunning, and you know, and to think that, you know, NBC is one of the three big legacy networks, and at one time, Meet the Press was in fact a serious show with serious people. I mean, even when Tim Russert was on there, it was a serious show, and now, well, it's like a lot of American politics from the left. It's a joke.
Yeah, and I think that one other thing that's happening, you'll find a lot, if they do happen to add a conservative, they tend to gain, I'm talking about a conservative host or co-host, they tend to gain audience. But instead of that, they're so desperately trying to do anything but that, because I really don't think it is about fair and balanced to a lot of these networks. What do you think about that?
No, it absolutely is not. And there's a reason why conservatives dominate talk radio, conservative websites dominate the internet and the blogosphere, because with the big media, you've got a choke point. You've got 5 or 6 real media outlets, and none of them are overwhelmingly conservative. Mm-hmm. Fox News is allegedly fair and balanced. They're not nearly as fair and balanced as they used to be, but that's about as close as you could get. You've got CNN, which people jokingly call the Clinton News Network. You've got MSNBC, which I call the Karl Marx Network. And you've got the alphabet networks, which are so confused they don't know what's going on. Yeah. It would be great if any of these networks had any brains at all. They start appealing to conservatives, because when you break down society in America, surveys say about 42% of Americans identify as conservative, about 30% identify as moderate or independent, and about 21% identify as liberal.
Yeah.
Well,
so just hear from both sides, I think, would be a brand new fresh start for some of these networks. Judson, I appreciate you being on this show today. Tell us where we can find you quickly.
TeaPartyNation.com and Twitter, Tea Party Nation.
All right, awesome.